When discussing the events following the debate leading up to the president's ultimate withdrawal, you mentioned a couple times that you were less involved in conversations than previously. At what point did you become less involved?
You know, I really don't recall, but certainly the second half of, by the second half of 2024, I was less involved in some of the discussions than I had been in the past.
Why is that?
You know, I'm not really sure, but I was no longer as involved as I had been. I wasn't included in things.
Thank you.
We can go off the record. All right, we'll go on the record. Ms. Dunn, I believe in the last hour, you said something to the effect of age was a primary issue for voters as to whether to vote for Joe Biden for re-election. Does that sound right?
That sounds pretty accurate.
And to the extent that age was a primary issue, would you agree that that was the voters' perception of Joe Biden?
Perception, I'm sorry, I'm not
Sure,
quite.
of course. So to the extent that voters had views on Joe Biden's age, that was their perception from viewing him on TV and from afar. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
And to be clear, you worked in the Biden White House, is that right?
yes,
On two different occasions.
yes,
Is it fair to say during your time at the White House, you worked closely with Joe Biden?
yes,
You saw him frequently?
yes.
Did you agree with, strike that, what were your opinions about Joe Biden's ability to serve as president and carry out the duties?
I thought the president made the decisions that only a president can make. I thought that he set the direction and tone for his administration, that he held, you know, his cabinet and his staff accountable, and that he was fully capable of acting as president. And indeed, he did so every day.
And did the polling in any way change your perception or opinion of what you just said?
No, the polling did not change my perception of the president.
Ms. Dunn, was age a factor in the 2020 election of Joe Biden?
Yes,
Was it also a factor for Donald Trump in the 2020 election?
not as much for Trump as it was for Biden.
Fair enough, but it was still a factor.
Yes,
that
it
voters
was.
considered. And same for 2024. Was age a factor in whether voters wanted to elect Donald Trump in your view of the polling? In 2024, excuse me.
In 2024, again, less of an issue for Trump than for Biden,
But an issue nonetheless.
but an issue.
Ms. Dunn, there have been allegations that broadly senior staff covered up Joe Biden's mental acuity during the 2024 campaign. Do you agree there was a cover-up in any respect?
I do not agree.
We'll leave it there. We'll go off the record. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Dunn, during your conversation with the minority just now, you said that, to paraphrase you, age was not as much of an issue for Trump as it was for Biden. Why do you think age had become an issue more for President Biden than it had for Trump?
Do you mean in the polls?
In the poll, sure, in the polls.
In the polling, each candidate has their own strengths and weaknesses. Age was a significant issue for Biden. Trump had very other issues. Okay, so that while age was a concern, there were other concerns about him that were far more, were stronger.
Yeah, I understand that. But,
Yeah.
but in in your opinion, why had that become an issue for President Biden and not for President Trump as much?
You know, that's a hard judgment for me to make. I think part of it is the definition of President Trump was so different. The concerns about him were very different, although very strong.
So you have no opinion as to why a narrative formed that concerned President Biden's age?
Well,
I'm not sure what you're talking
I'm
about.
not sure what the question is here.
Sure, you have no opinion as to why people were concerned about President Biden's age, but not as much President Trump's age.
I think she's talked ad nauseum about her understanding about people's concerns about President Biden's age. I think the topic of whether or not people were concerned about President Trump's age is definitely not what you guys are investigating here. But if you would like to investigate it, I'm sure somebody else would be more appropriate to do that.
I appreciate that, but I'm asking, I understand that we've talked about age quite a bit today, but I'm asking why you believe, in your opinion, you've worked in this area for quite a while, why that became an issue for President Biden and not for President Trump?
So I'm going to give a short answer to this, okay? There was a very concerted effort to make it an issue about President Biden, going back to the 2019 campaign, significant social media, significant, significant attacks on his age. So I think, and part of a media ecosystem in parts of the media that was very dedicated to it. So I think that helped because obviously there was an equal amount of focus on President Biden's opponent, but it was around different issues.
Okay, so you think that the public concern, just so I understand you, the public concern about President Biden's age was the cause of that was at its root, the media.
No,
So
that is not what I said.
Okay, please.
Okay? No, I just want to reframe this a little, okay? Which is, as I think we've discussed now since around 10 this morning,
Sure.
okay? President Biden's age was a concern for voters. It was a concern in the 2020 race. It was a concern in the 2024 race, okay? It was, there was no one thing that caused it. And of course, he was the oldest president to ever serve. So I would say at the end of the day, it was many, many things that caused that. There's no one thing I can point to.
Okay.
Okay, so that's really the answer.
And the last question on this, I just want to understand what you said previously about the media. What role was being played then by the media to exacerbate this issue? Or that's my word, not your word.
Right, and I don't want to use your word on
Okay.
that because I don't believe they exacerbated. I do believe that as part of the political campaign in 2019 and 2020, and then an ongoing basis while the president served, that there were parts of his opponent's ecosystem that, in particular, some of the media parts that spent a disproportionate amount of time covering the president's age and perceived issues around that as opposed to other things. That's all.
Okay.
Okay?
One more question. What parts of the media are you talking about? You said media parts, I just want to know.
Well, and I think I just made that clear, but I'll restate it just in case, which was it was parts of the media ecosystem that are aligned with opponents to President Biden. That's what I would say. Okay?
Okay.